Hey, my friends, welcome to The Word Made Digital. I'm your host, Joanna LaFleur. This is Season 2, Episode 4. Today, we're talking to two of the worship leaders and songwriters from the Belonging Co. out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm pumped about this. We've got Andrew Holt and Hope Darce joining us today for the conversation. And if you don't know the Belonging Co., it's the music side of it is a worship collective, and the church was started by Henry and Alex Seeley, and they're the founders of the whole church in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to dive into a little bit of the story of the church and how it's just really kind of exploded in the last number of years into a huge movement of God in the city of Nashville. But even then, particularly through its music, how it's spread from there out into the whole country and then internationally. And so the Belonging Co. music includes people like, maybe you know these names of Lauren Daigle, Carrie Job, Cody Carnes, Sarah Reeves, Meredith Andrews, Mia Fields, and more. And so today we have their worship pastor, Andrew Holt, and then Hope Darce, who's one of their worship leaders and songwriters, joining us on the podcast. Hey, I want to thank Wycliffe College for being the sponsor of this whole season, Season 2. If you don't know them already, they're an evangelical graduate school of theology at the University of Toronto. I went there myself, and they offer affordable, flexible theological education. I've got a whole interview with me around how it was impactful on my life and what I really took out of my education and my master's in theology from Wycliffe. They've got that on a link on their website, wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital. And I'm going to link that down in the show notes so you don't miss it. But I think one of the greatest learnings that I took out of my time at Wycliffe was that I gained more skill in how to learn, how to ask good questions, how to disagree with people well. And we all need to learn better how to disagree with people, especially in our very divisive times. I thought it was helpful for me learning new perspectives, and then particularly though, of course, how to then integrate those perspectives into my everyday life. And this is about church leadership, maybe my own personal development, my spiritual development, and what to do in this post-Christian culture as a person of faith and a communicator and a creative person. So you can check out more about that, wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital, and that's down in the show notes below. But I can't wait to dive into this conversation with the Belonging Co., and let's go.
Welcome to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. You're listening to Season 2, sponsored by Wycliffe College. Word Made Digital brings you interviews with brilliant Christian creatives and communicators to inspire, challenge, and equip you in your own work. The church carries the best news in the world, so we want to help you be the best creatives and communicators in the world. Here we go.
Hope and Andrew, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, I want to dive into the world of your church. A lot of people may have maybe heard of your church, the Belonging Co., but for people who haven't, tell us a little bit about the story of your church. Where did it start, and what has kind of happened in the last few years?
So we're part of a church called the Belonging Co. here in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been going almost 5 years officially at church. We're celebrating 5 years in February, which is crazy. But our church started in our pastor's basement, Henry and Alex Seeley. And it started, honestly, not to be a church. That was never the plan or the goal, but it was more of just, they saw a need in our city here in Nashville of a lot of touring musicians, creatives, anyone in that field that were gone on the weekends and needed a place to just encounter God and encounter Jesus. And so they started meeting on a Tuesday night in their basement, and really was just like a little worship Bible study. It wasn't even a church yet. And they didn't even think it was going to be a church. But what they found really quickly was that it was meeting such a need in our city of people who were serving the church every weekend, were out on the road in churches, maybe even leading worship, but weren't actually a part of a church. And so really quickly, in a year, I think it grew to over 100 people, 150 people, and they just didn't have space in their basement anymore, and they decided to launch it as a church. I think is the first time that you maybe came, Joanna.
Yeah. Long time ago now, it feels like.
Yeah, so they left the basement and started just as a church, and it grew like crazy. And now we have all day Sunday, 3 services on Sunday, and Tuesday night church. And it's just been just a beautiful journey of a lot of, including me and hope, like just finding that, rediscovering the love of the presence of God again, and rediscovering what it means to just be a son or a daughter, and not defined by our gift and what we carry. Because I think as creatives, a lot of times, even though now our church is much more than creatives, it's everyone in the world. But as creatives, a lot of times it's easy just to get caught up in, this is what I do, this is how I serve the church. And for me, at least, it's been this thing of rediscovering, like when I was a kid, and rediscovered Jesus, and my love for his presence. And when I came to the Belonging for the first time, that's what I found, a place where I could just be in his presence and love him and love being a son again. And so, yeah, that's a really short version of how our church started, but that's where we're at now.
Yeah. And so for you, Andrew, you're saying that somewhere along the way you appeared. Like, did you go when it was still happening on Tuesdays or whatever day it was in the of the Seeley's house, or you showed up somewhere later along?
I showed up later. So after they left the basement, probably a month after that, I came to when it was in a place called the Foundry. Me and my wife came. We weren't even engaged yet. We were still dating. And and walked in, and it was 200 people in this tiny little venue in South Nashville, and just like felt just as massive as it does now, because it was just an amazing presence of God. And now it's obviously way bigger, but so that's where I started. And I wasn't even fully going at that time. I was on staff at another church and going on Tuesday nights. And then a year and a half in, I called Belonging my home church. And March of 2016, I actually came on staff at the Belonging as the worship pastor, and been doing that ever since, and loving every second of it. It's my favorite thing in the world. So.
And he's loved so much that he came on staff. I can say that as one of the team members. He's literally the best. So, yeah, Andrew came a little bit later, because I remember when you came, because I've actually been there since the basement. So my husband and I started going in kind of early summer, that May, June of 2013. And they had been meeting for about 7 months in the basement, and it was still really small. It was still only like 20 people. Because at that point, it kind of had been like, Bible study feels like too small of a word, because it wasn't a Bible study. It was literally just 15 people getting ready to go, that were just literally desperate for an encounter with God, who had been in church their whole lives, or who had been around Christian culture their whole lives, but had really encountered Christianity, but were hungry to encounter Jesus. And Alex and Henry made a place for that. And that can sound funny, because you think, well, how do you encounter Christianity and not Jesus? But unfortunately, oftentimes that happens. Like what Andrew said, we get so caught up in the minutia of church life and Christianity culture, and it is kind of easy to like really not invite Jesus into that with us. And so they made this place where they were just like, we can't offer you a church, we can't offer you lights, we can't offer you positions and titles and all of those things, but what we can offer you is a really safe place to go after the presence of God and actually expect that he'll show up. And my husband and I ended up there about 6 months into it, when they were kind of starting to be like, maybe we should invite some other people, just maybe other people would be interested in coming. And we ended up being one of those people that got invited. And I was coming from a long journey of being in church culture. I'd been born and raised in the church. My dad was the pastor growing up, and then I spent 10 years on staff at a church, and so I was deep in that culture. But I was also in a season where it was the same. I had really lived in church life for a long, long time, and I loved Jesus and I loved the church, but there seemed to be this major disconnect of, I'm doing church life, I'm a good Christian, but I'm still struggling in a lot of areas that I'm not getting freedom from, or I don't feel that awe and wonder of Jesus, and I don't know what that, I didn't have words, honestly, to articulate it in that season, but they made a place for that. For us, they were just like, hey, you need Jesus. You don't need us. You just need an encounter, a fresh touch, honestly, from Jesus and through the Holy Spirit. And so to me, it's such a beautiful journey, because, that was the very beginning, when there was no, like, we're not a church. We don't know what we are. We're just people hungry for Jesus. To fast forward 5 years later, and honestly, I can say that the presence of God that I felt in a room with 20 people where there was no distinguishing of what it was yet is not any different than what it is today when there is 1,000 people in the room, or when we're in a big event space bringing all of our services together and there's 4,000 people in a room. It's not different because the heart has maintained the same posture of, we're not trying to be some great picture of what the church should look like. We're actually trying to be a bunch of people that are desperate for the presence of God. And hopefully that does enough shift in us each individually that we just live out being the church, and we live out being a bride that's full of the presence of God and full of the love of God. And you know, so it's been a really fun journey and a really special journey for my husband and I. So
wow. And do you think that, as you're describing like this longing in yourself, was it something you knew you had and then you sought out this group of people, or you found this group of people and they helped you see that there was a longing you didn't know you had? Do you know what I mean?
Both. It was both.
Yeah.
Honestly, at least for me it was. We were in a season where we really loved the church that we were in, but we could sense God was calling us to something that we couldn't describe. We didn't know what it was. There was a restlessness in our spirits, my husband and I, and the natural didn't make any sense because I was on staff at a church. I had a great paying job. I loved the local church. I'm like you, I've been a local church girl my whole life. So it didn't make sense that suddenly everything didn't fit anymore. Everything that had once fit like a perfect glove suddenly just felt too tight or too loose or too uncomfortable. And at the same time, I was kind of walking through a season of I was really struggling internally. Like I mentioned, like just couldn't get freedom internally, freedom over different things like shame, rejection, insecurity, just different stuff, anger. Like I was just in a season of really struggling. And so I couldn't understand why it wasn't working, if that makes sense. Like I'm praying, I'm doing all of the things I'm supposed to do, I'm serving the Lord, but I'm not really getting freedom. And so my husband and I just kind of took a step back and just said, God, we don't know what it looks like to have complete freedom in this season, but we will do whatever you ask us to do. Like we're willing to lay anything down. We're willing to walk away from anything because we're so desperate to just actually be as healthy and whole in Christ as we can be. And it ultimately led to me resigning from my job at the church. And at the time I was a traveling worship leader, leading all over the country, doing events, big conferences. And I stopped doing that as well because I was just like, you know, none of that really matters if my heart is sick, and none of that matters if my sick heart is going to impact my marriage or it's going to impact my parenting. So I just was like, I'm going to walk away from it. And so I knew something needed a shift, but I didn't know what it was, honestly, 100%. And then when we ended up in that basement and around these people who were a little further along in that journey, but I think had kind of gone through the similar experiences of like, there was suddenly a restlessness of, I just think there's more. I just think there's more freedom in Christ. I think there's more to the presence of God than what I'm experiencing. And so once we got there, then it was kind of like, oh, aha, like I couldn't tell you what I was hungry for. I just knew I was hungry for something that I wasn't currently taking in. And then that culture kind of was like, oh, okay, this is it. And then it was a beautiful culture because it wasn't just like, we're going to spoon feed it to you and we're just going to give it to you. It was a genuine culture that said, like, actually, this is something that you're going to have to desire. This is something that you're going to have to want. Otherwise, it's not just like someone else doesn't sustain your freedom. Someone else doesn't sustain the presence of God for you. You have to do that on your own in intimacy with the Lord. And so as much as I'm as grateful for the culture that they created in that season, I'm just as much as grateful that they really taught us, like, this has to be ongoing between you and Jesus, not just moments in this basement, not just moments when you have the amazing Henry Seeley leading worship. It has to go so much deeper than that. So,
yeah, Andrew. Yeah, can we talk a little bit about that sort of in the larger scope? Not just, obviously, it's amazing. Actually, it's really, I think will really connect with a lot of people as you're talking about. Thanks for being so personal, because I think a lot of people are in those places. A lot of people listening to the podcast, they are working in church or serving in a significant way in church ministry. They love their local church. But there are some things that maybe they can't quite articulate that aren't right within themselves. I'm not trying to point a finger at their church, but within them about maybe over time you get lazy or disappointed or jaded by experiences that lead you to less pursuing of that intimacy with God, and then to find some people that you can do that again with. What I'm curious to know, Andrew, what you would say about, I'm going to call it like the Nashville culture. I don't know where you guys are originally from, but most people aren't from Nashville. They are from somewhere else and ended up there. Talk to me about like how that's working, the Nashville culture is working against, for a Christian person who shows up in Nashville for whatever reason. How is that? How can the culture of the city be in conflict with the pursuit of Christ or the Spirit of God?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the unicorns, and I did grow up in Nashville. So. Oh,
wow. Oh, cool.
For me, I remember when I walked in the belonging for the first time, that what we're talking about that we encountered, I didn't even know I was hungry for it. You know, I was so hardened to, I didn't even know it, but to just church life. I had been on staff at a church since I was a freshman in high school, since I was 15 years old, leading worship. And it just becomes so routine for me of this is what I do. I wake up on Sunday, I go to church, I lead, I get off stage, I sit down, and I do it all over again the next week, you know, and it genuinely started from a place of I knew that's what I was supposed to do. That was the call of my life. And I had such a love for it the whole time. But slowly what happens, I think, is you get into this routine and all of a sudden you're just stuck, and you kind of lose slowly over time that love for God and his presence. You know, when I started leading worship when I was 13 or 14, in just a house group with my acoustic, you know, I wasn't doing that for anything other than I just loved God's presence. I love seeing my friends encounter him. And what naturally happens as human beings is we get older and other motives start to creep in, and, you know, other life stuff starts to creep in, and there's more than just me and my acoustic guitar in someone's house. You know, there's more to life than that. And I think when I walked into the belonging, what I rediscovered is just the God's presence, and I didn't have to do anything. You know, they didn't need me at the belonging. You know, there was amazing people up there. They were killing it, and for the first time, it was just me and God, and I had to rediscover it, or I had to get out. It was confronting in the best kind of way, you know, of this is what I need, and I had to make a choice within myself of I'm going to choose to run back after God in his presence. And I think in Nashville, it is such a religious city in a way of there's a lot of churches and there's a lot of professional Christians, you know, there's a lot of professional worship leaders, and there's a lot of people that do this for a living. And so I think the fact that Henry and Alex are from Australia and the culture that they bring is such a gift for our city, because I think it's easy in church, especially in larger churches, where it can become this thing of we need to put on a performance every Sunday to have a good, entertaining thing where people want to come to church and want to come back. And I think in Australia, it's just not the same. It's such an opposite mindset of, actually, we know that when we lift up the name of Jesus and we invite him to come into our service, that's what's attractive to people. That's what draws people back. It's not whether we can sing a good Katy Perry song, you know, or whether we can have a good light show. All that stuff is amazing, and I'm all about the production side of things. But what I've learned from them is that it's actually when we invite the presence of God to come, when we invite the Holy Spirit to come, he's the one that breaks down the walls of religion. He's the one that breaks down the walls of performance. And I think for me personally, like what I was saying, when I walked in, I wasn't needed in belonging. So I've been a year and a half of just sitting and getting my heart right and just receiving, you know, and where I had for 10 years, I'd been serving every single week at church. And so I think, and just from a practical side of team for us at church, we're one of the, I think, very few churches that when you walk in and you say, I'm a guitar player, I'm a drummer, how can I get involved? We're like, awesome, you should just sit in church for a while and make sure that this is your home. Whereas in other churches, I think it's people have become so accustomed to, oh, you're a drummer, get on stage, you're on roster next week on Planning Center, you know? And
Like, we have no bass players. We're glad you came.
Yeah, we're very blessed at the Belonging where we don't have to have that. Our church is full of musicians. And so I think what happens is we just say, hey, come sit, come enjoy the presence of God, come find a home in the community, and maybe even serve somewhere else in our church. And maybe they're like me, where they just been serving, and their identity gets so wrapped up in their gift and what they do for the church. And that was me. And so the best thing that could have happened for me was doing nothing for a season. And then God's the one that opens the door. He's the one that makes a way. And so, yeah, I think all that stuff for us has become so important, to just tearing down that idea of performance-based church, and just actually getting back to the simplicity of encountering God and inviting his presence, and then being changed and taking it into our city and seeing our city change because of it.
Yeah. So in your worship team, who gets to play? Like you're talking about, I love that, how you're saying you don't, quote unquote, need people. You have enough. Every instrument, you've got 20 people lined up who are professional level drummers, guitar, keys, whatever. So who gets to play? Like what is it that you're looking for? What's your process even of getting people as part of team? I think for people who are listening who are like, give me like the practical, like, do you have auditions? Do you like you find them in the crowd and, a light shines down on them and they should come? How does it work?
Yeah. We really don't have any sort of like process as far as ABC. It's honestly for us, it's all about relationship. It's all about like trusting the Holy Spirit to highlight people, but it's not like the heavens open up and the glory shines down on one person. It's more of just as people get involved and find their home at the Belonging, I just start to build a relationship with them, or Hope starts to build a relationship with people. Henry and Alex build a relationship with people, and pretty soon, like God makes it so obvious who's meant to be a part of it. And it's been a switch for us because honestly, there's no way that everyone could be on the worship team at our church, because people would be on once a year, if everyone was on. I think that's been a slow moving of the ship, for Henry and Alex. And Henry's so great at it, where he just says, look, just because you have this gift in your life, that doesn't mean it's meant to always play out within the church context. Like maybe you were meant to come here, be a part, get equipped, and take it out into what you're doing, into the country gig you're playing, or the pop writing scene that you're writing for, or maybe you're meant to be an artist that carries this farther than it can be just here in Nashville. And so it's been tearing down that idea of like the pinnacle of success is when I make it to the platform at church.
Right.
And actually just trusting God that he's going to highlight the people that are meant to be a part of it. And honestly, if I have a relationship with someone before they ever are on a team, before they're ever a part of our team, it's way easier for us to see them win within the team, because I have that relationship already set. I already have it set in stone. Like if there is an issue, we'll already have that relationship, so we can just hang out and talk about it. Or if there needs to be a shift in something, well, we already know each other really well, so I know how to tackle that, So yeah, hopefully that helps.
I think as someone who's on the team, one of the things that has been so significant and different than every other team that I was involved in and building, because you're talking about auditions, and that's the culture that I came from, like prior, and it was a very much like you go through the typical like membership classes, and then the growth track class, and then you get filtered into an area of service, and you have a natural gift at music. Clearly, you're going to go to like the worship team, and then there's auditions, and there's nothing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That is what I knew. And when I came to this culture, Henry very, very early on kind of began to lay the groundwork that was not how we were going to build. And I remembered thinking like, well, how do you build if you don't build that way? Like I was just so curious, like what could that even look like? And what I have watched over the years is, the Holy Spirit who's given us the blueprint from the beginning. And we've really trusted that it might not look the way that we're all used to, but we really trust that if we lean into that, his blueprint is always the most fruitful for the body. And I think one of the things that I've seen over the years is that, especially with Henry and the way he started out, it was, and what Andrew's saying is, it's family first. you build family first. Because here's the thing about families, like families, if there's ever a moment that they have to work something out, there's a glue that's there because they're actually operating like a family. What tends to happen is that gift and talent is kind of elevated, and we're hoping that that's the thing that's going to keep us together. It's going to be the glue of like, well, we think the same, or we have similar passions, so that's going to hold us together. And then when we really maybe really look into it, like with a real clear flashlight, there might not be a lot of family there. There might not be a lot of relationship there. And we think that going to rehearsals, or we think that being on the stage is the moment that we're building family, but it's really not. Like when we're all on that stage together, that should absolutely be an overflow of what's already been happening in our lives on a regular basis. That we actually know what each person's walking out, what they're carrying, what they're the highs and the lows of their life, so that when we're on the stage and we're carrying something as a family, we're able to so hone in what the Holy Spirit is doing, because we're actually moving in unity and as one.
It takes a lot of time too, right? Like what you're saying is if you're going to rush, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It won't.
And I would just encourage anyone listening, like, just because it's our blueprint of how we do it doesn't mean it has to work that way for you.
Agreed.
Like if you're in a city that doesn't have a lot of musicians, and you do only have one or two bass players or one or two drummers, you can still put these practices in place, even if you're doing auditions, even if you're putting out signups. Like, make sure that you're still trusting the Holy Spirit to build relationship and build family within your church. Even if you are choosing people that way, after you choose them, make sure you're being intentional and spending the time like you're talking about. It does take time, but it's so worth it on the back end of saying, actually, I know that before I get up to lead, this group of people that I'm looking at, I know all of their hearts. I know their families. I know what they're going through. I know that they came to our church to encounter God, and they had an encounter with God, and they want to see other people encounter God now, And I can do that now because I have a relationship with everyone, and it's not just, well, this was the best drummer in our city, so we just put him up there, But in reality, I know that he's having a really hard time in his family, and maybe he's not in the greatest place, but it's actually, let's just love each other as family and choose people based on their walk with God and where they are with God. And then let the talent and the music side of all that will always follow and step with that. If you put God first and put his ways first and his kingdom first, he'll always work the rest out. So
I heard Michael Farron's a songwriter, worship leader here, and recently I heard him say this thing on a podcast actually that I thought was just amazing. And he said, as worship leaders, as pastors, as anybody who's taking the platform, our first priority obviously is to be in ongoing intimacy with Jesus, but after that, it's to pastor people first.
Yeah.
And if you're not pastoring the hearts of people, then it's really hard then to expect that there's going to be authority in the overflow of your worship. But that if you just pastor and shepherd people, and this is really the call, I think, on all of our lives as Christians, but especially those of us that have the privilege and the honor of standing in front of people and being, kind of the cheerleader of hey, we can do this. We can go somewhere in the presence of God that's going to bring victory and healing. You have to pastor people more than you do anything else. And everything will follow it. If you put that first, everything else will come as a byproduct, because the heart of Jesus is to pastor people. Yeah. So not getting it backwards, going after the performance, after the excellence, going after the, the perfect set list, and then being oh, but I forgot people. Let me run back to the people. I think if we can flip the order, no matter what our systems are, no matter the size of our churches or the cities that we live in, I think the same thing that happens in our church every week can be happening in your church every week. 200.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the role of pastoring for people on platform, do you mean in your church you would view if you're a bass player, if you're a drummer, you're playing lead guitar, you are also carrying a shepherding, pastoring role off platform in some capacity? I
think we all are called to that. I don't know how Andrew feels about that, but I think I think that's what we should just do as Christians, that we are literally building relationships or checking in with people. Like if I'm on this, it's not just the people on the platform that I'm doing like worship with. I think it goes way beyond that I'm being a good steward of the people that God has put in my life, and that I'm actually investing into people, and I'm checking in. I'm calling them, hey, how was your week? Or, hey, I know you mentioned that you were having surgery on Friday. I call them on Friday and I'm like, hey, are you doing any, do you need someone to come to the hospital? Do you, literally just being family. That's really what pastoring is being family members that just show up for people. And, or a couple weeks ago, I was on team, one of our leaders was on team, and I could sense in my heart, he was sad. I could just sense it. And so, after we had gone through the set list and that kind of in-between time between those set lists and preparing to leave, I just was like, hey, are you okay? I just felt in my spirit, you were sad. And she was like, yeah, I'm struggling with something. And we just kind of unpacked it. And you know what? We sit there and we just were like, okay, Holy Spirit, what's really going on? What's the root of this? And we began to just pray with each other. And the Holy Spirit begins to just speak to her heart and show her some of the roots of some things. And, that's actually being family. That was more important in that moment to me, or that I, spent an extra 15 minutes, getting coffee or doing whatever. So I think it's just being aware of people and being really intentional to build relationship with people that has nothing to do with the musicianship or the talent part of it, if that makes the gifting part of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And if you are a musician or you're a singer, whatever you do, you're vocalist, you've often been trained for 20 years in how to do that thing. But this other side that you're describing, a lot of people have never seen it modeled, and so they just have never been trained in how to do it.
Yeah, and I think as you lead your team that way, it naturally flows throughout your team. It happens as a staff. Henry and Alex lead us that way, so I have learned from them how to do it. So now I'm leading my team in a way that they see me doing that, they see Hope doing that. And so just now as we're talking, a guy on the team just texted me, how am I doing? How are you and your wife doing? And instead, it didn't have to be me reaching out to him. Right. He was reaching out to me. And so I think as people see you lead that way, naturally they'll start to do it as well. And because reality, our team's over 50 people. I can't every day check in with 50 people and make sure everyone's doing well. But if I have a team that is family and loves one another, they're doing that within themselves as well. And Hope's reaching out to people. There's guys on our team that are always reaching out to people that they know and just loving each other well. And not because it's their job, because it's no one's job except mine, but it's just because they love each other well. And they want to, they know, we know if we have family and we get up to lead together, there's going to be more authority. There's going to be more anointing because unity commands blessing. And so because we're unified, before we ever get up to lead together, you can sense that as we lead. So it's just really important.
That happens as a result is that when everyone is doing that across the board, when you see it modeled, what happens is it breaks down that thing that can kind of creep in of the expectation that the pastor, the paid pastor, has to be the one speaking out. Because I think sometimes when we get trapped in that, then that's where disappointment can come in. There was an expectation of this is the person that had to be speaking into my life, or this is the person that had to be discipling me, or this is the person that had to be pouring in. And when you make it a culture across the board, it really diffuses that thing to creep in, and suddenly you go, oh, you know what? It is not this one person's job to be checking in me. If I look at my community, there are so many people checking in on me. There are so many people that I'm doing life with, and that are and so I think that to me at least has been one of the really beautiful things, because I'm not on staff at the Belonging. I'm a volunteer, but I was on staff for 10 years at church. And I'll be honest, I didn't pastor this way because of exactly what you said. I didn't see it modeled. And I look back at those years, and I've even to go back to some people and even just ask for forgiveness. I did not steward what God had put in my hands well in that season. And I'm so sorry. I was not attentive to you. I was not tender in building relationship with you. And I don't get stuck there. I just go, I'm going to do this season different because I've seen it modeled different. And it has been so fruitful. It has been so beneficial, not to just my life, but I think to other people's lives, that we're all, functioning in our community this way.
Yeah. It's amazing. So I'd like to pivot the conversation to talk specifically around songwriting, because I feel like on that topic we could probably spend a whole interview, but I do want to get to some stuff around songwriting with you guys, and maybe that's actually a nice foundation as we talk about songwriting. We've talked about family, we've talked about the trust building on your team. So talk to me about your personal, or maybe the church's approach, maybe they're one and the same. What's your approach to songwriting? Are you doing that by yourselves? Are you doing that in team? How does that go?
Yeah, we absolutely do it as family. When we first started writing for church was right after I came on staff, and we had our first writing retreat. That was like my first job was, hey, plan a writing retreat. Never done it before. And it probably could have gone better, but it was amazing. Logistically, it could have gone better. Now I just have Hope help me with everything, so she makes everything better. Just kidding. Not kidding at all, actually. But so essentially, what happened is we were gotten to a place in the church where we were choosing songs every week, and just got to a place where we knew that we didn't have songs to sing to the heart of what God was doing in our church. And so, honestly, the whole process started from that first. It was me and Henry talking every week, going, actually, I think it's time to write for our church. There's people in our church that obviously are amazing songwriters, and God's doing so much in our house that we need to put that to song now and put voice to that. So we went away with our team, and the first thing we did on the retreat was we just had a session where we worshiped together, and Henry and Alex led us and imparted some vision. And the first thing we did, I remember we all closed our eyes. And you got to remember, this isn't just like worship leaders in a room. Like, it's producers, it's songwriters that aren't necessarily vocalists. But Alex had everyone close their eyes and just sing out one by one, like one after the other, sing out in the spirit, whatever they felt like God was doing. And it was, for me, I'm a vocalist, I'm a worship leader, and for me it was nerve-wracking. So I know for a lot of other people it was nerve-wracking as well. But it was this beautiful, session of just breaking down those walls of insecurity and those walls of comparison. And from the very start, it was actually just, we're here to put voice to what God's doing. It doesn't matter whether you've written 500 songs before, or whether you've written one song in your whole life, or you've never written a song. Like, you're here for a purpose. God's put you here for a purpose, and we all are part of this church. And so it started from this place of worship, a place of, we just want to put voice to what God's doing. And there were so many songs from that 3 days together that ended up on the record that we put out on the earth. But Henry, in that first session, Henry said, the reason we're here is not to make a record. We're not looking for certain types of songs. We're not looking for ABC of 2 fast songs, 1 mid-tempo song, and 20 slow songs. That's not the goal. It was actually just, let's just start to write. Let's worship together as a team and as a family and see what happens. And if these songs never go anywhere else but our church, then that's the goal. And so, and I think just because of that, now our culture is just very family based. Like, me and Hope and someone else will get together and write in someone's house, and half of the writing is usually just catching up and talking about our families, and me talking about how I'm getting ready to be a dad, whatever it is, like, that's half of it. And then, or like talking about what God's teaching us, and then that spurs us to write about something. And it's never been a thing of, oh, we need this kind of song. We don't have any of, we need another fast song, so let's just write it. It's never that. It's more of, let's just write out of a place of revelation of what God's teaching us, and learning how to write is just seeing people like Hope, people like Mia, who we were talking about earlier, seeing them, how they write, because
Yeah, we lost a bit of what you were just saying there, but I love that you're writing on team. In my experience in songwriting, I can only take something so far, but when you get the other minds, the other skill set, the other approaches in a room, you're not only just learning from each other, but you really are growing in trust with one another. And at the other end, the song's going to be better because you didn't do it by yourself.
Absolutely.
I mean, I so grew up in a culture, like, just in Nashville for years and years and years. Like, co-writing wasn't a thing. It's really only, I think, really blossomed in the last probably decade that co-writing has become kind of the norm. And immediately, like, when we started doing it, I had taken several years off from writing. So I was a little nervous, actually, to come back into a songwriting place, because in that break, God had done this deep transformational work in my heart. So I was coming back in hoping that I could steward it now with clean hands and a pure heart, because I could kind of look back at the years prior and realize really what was motivating me was just wanting validation and wanting, just identity to come through that. And so I was going into this season being like, actually, all I want are songs that bring breakthrough in the atmosphere. All I want songs that set a tone where people can now experience in worship what I've experienced. Because that's what happened to me, is that Henry would just be leading on a piano and just, leading songs Philip written, that he would just go into a spontaneous moment. And I would literally have an encounter with Jesus, and the Holy Spirit would begin to speak to me and really highlight some things that were patterns of behavior that were rooted in different things. And I honestly experienced so much healing and so much deliverance process. And I think that has really been a very consistent testimony of our house and what has happened when people come into our culture and they experience worship. And I think, at least I want to believe, that happened because it was how Henry, from the very beginning, he was doing that because he had that same experience in worship with Jesus. And so he was really, truly just giving a DNA to each of us. And so I think all of us as a team, when we approach these songs, we're going, I know what I have encountered in worship in this house that has transformed my life. And it is not attached to the person that was leading or the song that was being sung, even though those can be pivotal songs that we carry in our spirits through seasons. It was because I legitimately had an encounter with Jesus through the Holy Spirit. And so I think whenever we're writing, we're thinking about that. I'm thinking about the season that I'm in and what God is speaking to me. And then I'm also going, well, I'm going to write about that. And I'm going to write about it from a place that I hope it brings the same kind of revelation for someone else. Like, I remember maybe the last retreat we went on, one of our friends, I was talking to her and I said, we're going to retreat this week. And she's actually one of the staff members. And I said, what are you longing for? What are you longing to sing? And she said, I just need a song about breakthrough. She's like, but I don't want a sad song. She's like, I need a song that carries a heart of praise through breakthrough. And that so resonated in my spirit. Like, I couldn't shake that. Like, that was really significant to me. And I remember we went in to the retreat, and in one of the sessions, I just shared her heart with the guys in the room. And I was like, it'd be really cool to meet that need for our house. Because if she's carrying that, she's probably not the only one. And so just in that moment, we're just like, okay, Jesus, show up. If you've got something to say, we want to catch it. And we did. And we literally had a song that was birthed in that room that now our church carries and has been, I think, really significant for people, because it's really been a praise song that just declares breakthrough over our lives through the act of praising. So that I think is pastoring. When you are aware of what your church, the people in your church are walking through. Like, there's been people in our church that have really struggled to get pregnant. And that was my story. I had infertility for years, and then we had 2 miracle children. And so there's something in me that when I'm even leading, or when I'm thinking about it as a worship leader, those people's names are in my mind when we're thinking about those songs. Like, when I'm thinking about a lyric, I'm going, I want a lyric for this woman that I know is believing and praying for, a baby. I'm writing this lyric for this woman who's walking through cancer. Like we're sensitive to that, but we're also writing in conjunction with that the truth of where our lives are and the authority. Because I think you have authority from writing from your revelation and writing from what God is doing in your life. If you're just trying to string together some, poetic lyrics, I don't know that it'll have authority to it if it's not actually being lived out in your own life, if that makes sense. And that's the whole team approaches it that way.
Yeah. Well, and as you're saying, this idea of writing out of what you're hearing from people is out of my own conviction in what songwriting can be is only your church can write the songs of the stories coming out of your church. Like no other church can write those stories. And so, and in our church in a much smaller scale kind of way, we are intentional about songwriting, and we've, released some songs and some EPs for our church, and some have gone a little bit farther than that, but ultimately it's the conviction of we're trying to tell the story exactly as you say of the people in our church and what God has been doing, or what they're hoping that God will do in their situation, in their life, in our church. So I'm hearing you say, contrary to the Nashville thing of like, here's the writing deadline, this is the date for album release, we got to write to this, we need a song for communion, we need a call to worship, we need 2 songs that are going to sound like Young and Free. It's not like,
sorry, say it again.
Well, just that, it's you're not doing it maybe from a business perspective. You're doing it from a spirit-led perspective.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. So for people who... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, in the very beginning, it's never been from the confines of making a record and the rules of making a record, I think it can be really easy to get confined by that and say, well, it has to be ABC because we're going to release it. And I think it would be really dangerous when you start from the fact of when we release this is the most, in the world's eyes, successful way to do it. It's actually just been, let's see what God does. And if honestly, we've, as a belonging, have broken all the rules of what you're supposed to do when you release a record. You released a record with 16 songs. A lot of them were over 8 or 9 minutes long.
No marketing. Like we just were like, boom, there's the world.
Put it out there. And I think if God breathes on something, then he'll carry it where it needs to go. You don't have to worry about doing it the way everyone else is doing it. And even the fact that you don't have to worry about releasing a record, I think it's become a very popular, because it's so easy to do for churches around the country, around the world, to say, well, we can release a record, so we should just do it. And I don't think everyone's meant to do that. I think everyone is meant to write songs for their house. Everyone's meant to write songs for their church because that's the gift God's given us. And it's something that you can see powerful change in your house when you write songs specifically for your church. But just because you can release a record, I don't think you're always meant to release a record. And so for us, even as our church has gone through this, it's never been, we're going to release a record on April 22nd, so we need to put these deadlines in place to make that happen. It's been this really organic, natural thing of when we have the songs, we'll sit down and produce those songs and and even the way we record, it's not ever just one night that we record songs. It's over the course of multiple nights. Like the record we released was over the course of 5 or 6 nights, and we waited till we had the take or the moment we knew had the presence of God on it, and we knew God had breathed on it, and we released that. We put that out. So it's taking the pressure off of that, because as a worship leader, for me, I know it's if I know this one night is when this song's going to get released, I'm not necessarily going to be as free in the way I lead. It's going to be confining for me. And so I think that we've been really intentional saying, this is not necessarily the moment that's going to be for the whole world to hear. Let's just lead our people in worship. Let's invite God to come and do our best to steward these songs, and God takes care of the rest. And if it's not the perfect record, God's not after the perfect record in the world's eyes. He's after a record that carries authority and carries anointing, and so all that to say.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, maybe one of my closing questions for you. Not everybody listening is going to come from a church that, obviously most churches don't do it the way that you're describing. If they're leading worship, it maybe doesn't feel like a family. If they're under leadership, maybe that leadership is not pastoring them or shepherding them well. Maybe they are, or there's people who maybe are feeling like, oh yeah, we got to write songs about what God is doing in our church more. We need to put some time aside for that. What are some things that, when you think of maybe who you were a few years ago and what God's done in your life as a worshiper, as a creative, as a leader, frankly, just as a human being following after the ways of Jesus, what are some things you want to encourage? That could be a practical thing, or just an encouragement for people listening today who might be feeling that sounds nice for them, but that's not like my situation.
I think one of the things that I take from that season, from the seasons before, is a couple things. One, even if the environment you're in, if it's not in your mindset the ideal environment, I would say more than anything, honor first. Honor the people that you are in, that you are serving, and that you are under. But I also think, in conjunction with that, like, get away with Jesus. Like, get away with Jesus and actually figure out, like, what is it that is either drawing me to something deeper in you, Jesus, or what is it keeping me from wanting to go to something deeper with you, Jesus? And realizing that it's not the church's fault or responsibility to do that work. That's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Because what happens is we lead from the revelation of who Jesus is. We're not meant to lead from the health or lack of health of the church culture that we're in. And I think that's a really easy place to slip into.
Yeah.
I could go back and talk to my 25-year-old self. I would say the church is not good or bad. That's not the issue. You need to separate from that, and you need to go and do a really deep work with Jesus and fall in love with Jesus and have ongoing intimacy with Jesus through the Holy Spirit. And as you do that, everything else is going to start to kind of make sense and highlight itself for you in your own life. It might mean that you're in. It might not ultimately be the place that God's calling you to stay. Or it might be the place that God's actually saying you need to surrender and really give your whole heart to this culture. Vice versa. It can look like a lot of different things. But I think if you don't get away and you don't have that intimacy with Jesus, it's going to be really hard as pastors or the people that are on staff making the decisions for their creative and worship teams to actually get the download from heaven of the blueprint for their church and their house. And instead, what can happen is you're pulling bits and pieces from everyone else's and trying to create one yourself. Really go like, this is what your house needs to do. Exactly what Andrew said. It could be that you think you're meant to make a record, and the Holy Spirit's going, no. You're meant to actually start doing monthly dinners in your homes as a team. Like, it can just look so crazy different than what we think. But I just know from experience that maintaining the intimacy with Jesus will actually set you up to then make really good, healthy, heaven-led voices for the structure and the execution of what your team should be doing, how it should be operating, what it should be growing in, if it's songwriting or pastoring or building together. Yeah. So that's what I would say to my younger self or to other worship leaders that are listening. I'm sure Andrew has great wisdom and insight on this.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Hope. I was just recently reading a classic book. It's A Celebration of Discipline by Richard J. Foster. And it's this idea he talks about of the spiritual disciplines that we need to do of meditation and fasting and eating together, all these kinds of things we can do that we're waiting for someone else to do for us. We want somebody else to be responsible for our spiritual growth. And then we blame other people when we feel disconnected, or we're in bitterness or unforgiveness, or we just aren't seeing breakthrough in our all responsible spiritual life and our connection to the Lord. And so I'm reminded in reading this book, if people haven't read it or get the audiobook or however people digest content, just very practical. It's a classic book about whatever our environment, whether it's healthy or less healthy, we can take responsibility. And we can change our culture too. We can be part of culture change, but more than that, at the end of it, we are responsible for ourselves.
Yeah,
and so
for the culture of our own hearts.
Yeah,
one of the things our pastors always say that I just think is so beautiful, and we've really, I think, adopted as a church culture is, you have to dig wells for yourself. No one else can dig the well for you, and it's not to your benefit to want to drink someone else's water. Like, it's always going to be to your benefit to dig your well, because then the water from your well will have so much authority, so much power, so much life in it, that you then can be one that pours out water to others. But if I'm always taking from someone else's well, then I'm also not actually digging for my own authority and my own power and my own victory in Jesus. And I just think that would be a really cool thing if we begin to see that become part of the mindset in the church culture across the board. I just think we could just do so much damage to the kingdom of darkness. And I think we could take back so much ground and so much territory that's been lost over the generations. And we would just honestly be a light that shines on a hill, because each of us individually would have so much light and so much life in our own lives that it wouldn't matter that maybe someone has experienced really deep disappointment in church or just in life in general, because they could be like, but there's something about you, there's something on your life that is different and I don't understand. That's the whole point, right? Like the whole point.
Yeah.
Whether you are leading worship, or you're working in an office, or you're serving in kids ministry, or you're pastoring a church, or you work at a school, it doesn't matter. Like, the same should apply there that it does for each of us as creatives in worship. This isn't about the gifts that God's put on our lives. It's actually about the conditions of our hearts and our minds and our souls that then enable us to really flourish with light in those gifts and in those callings. So
I love it. And I would only believe that Andrew would say all the same things if we hadn't lost him.
He's talking. No, so it's fine.
That's technology for you. It's okay. I mean, I'm just so grateful for... Yeah, we love you. Sorry you're gone. You had great things to say. Obviously, lots of insight. If people want to find you both, where, like, do you, maybe you know his, I'll link it in the show notes, but where could people find you or your church in the internet?
Sure. You can find all of us on Instagram. So Andrew is just Andrew Holt on Instagram. I'm Hope Darst with a D on Instagram. And then The Belonging has a website, which is thebelonging.co. And we also are on Facebook. The churches, The Belonging is on Facebook, and we are on Instagram, and there's several different pages. Oh, you're back!
Oh, Andrew has returned.
I dropped away. I came back. I would just agree with a lot of what Hope was saying, in that you can only control what you do and how you carry yourself and your walk with God. So the more you can get away with God, like Hope was saying, is the more you can spend that time with him, and the more you can be the person that you're wanting to be around, like the way we are is so contagious. And at the end of the day, like, God's put you in the position you are for a reason. And so the biggest thing I've learned in this season for me of being on staff at our church is, like, it's so important to serve your pastor's call and your pastor's vision, because God's given that to them for a reason. And so you're not always going to 100% agree with that. That's part of life, of being humans. And I think, but I remember from the very beginning, I learned, like, when I came on staff, I went on to Planning Center, like, very practical here. I went on to Planning Center and I saw how Henry labeled things. I saw how he set up every service, and how long each song he was in the order of service. He made the certain songs 4 minutes long and certain songs 8 minutes long. Little things like that I wouldn't necessarily do, and I didn't even know. But I knew it was important to serve my pastor's vision and to carry that out well. And God's always going to 100% honor that. He's always going to give you grace for the season you're in, and you can only control how you carry out yourself every day. And so be intentional about waking up. If you want to write songs, wake up. If you have no one else to write with in your church, write songs on your own. Wake up, spend time with God, worship on your own. Don't wait to worship until you're on a platform. Actually, just begin to spend that time with God on your own, and you'll see everything else fall into step with that. When you put God first, he always honors everything else. And so just be encouraged wherever you are. And
Yeah, I love that. I think of like the life of David, right? Where he, as a worship leader, as a creative, as an artist, as a leader, he was under this terrible dude, right? The terrible dude, i.e. the king. The king was out to get him, was a corrupt guy, and yet we have a model in Scripture of how to serve, even under bad leadership, how to pursue the Lord for ourselves, how to write amazing songs that stand the test of time. Obviously an amazing and anointed person. There will be no one like David, but we have a model that we can follow. I love that. And maybe that's an encouragement for people to go back to his story and to read it and see under all circumstances how we can lead, serve, and honor those who are put over us by God. Hey, if people want to find you, Andrew, if people want to find you online, where would people find you?
The best place is probably Instagram. I'm not very active on Twitter or Facebook. I just send all my Instagrams to Twitter or Facebook, and I'm becoming more and more unactive on Instagram, but that's probably the best place to find me.
But we do pop onto Instagram more than anything else. So
I'm also about to have a baby in 3 weeks, so please forgive all the baby pics that are about to come.
No, we do. Well, give the people what they want. We're going to want a lot of those.
I'm going to become that guy that just posts pictures of his baby all the time.
I love that guy that posts pictures of his baby.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it gets weird if your kid's like 14, don't do it anymore. But if it's a baby, we want the baby.
That's amazing.
Well, anyways, in the show notes, we'll link people to where they can find you. And of course, I think after listening to this, people are going to go and put your record on repeat. People are going to want to listen over and over today because they're getting context and the behind the scenes on the heart behind the songs that you've written and released. And we're just really grateful. I got to say on my own, just to be personal, I'm really grateful for your church. It's a place, as someone who works in church, that has been an inspiration to me. I've had a chance to know some of your leaders, and they're the real deal. And I'm just so grateful for what you're doing in a place like Nashville that needed a place like this for people to come and belong. And your music is that thing that can be portable with us, right? That we, as people who aren't part of your church, week to week, month to month, we can carry that in our ears, and it can inspire us in our own pursuit of the Lord, and in our own just desiring of His presence in our life. And can't wait. I mean, I know it sounds like there's no plan, but I can't wait to hear more songs coming out of your house in the future.
Sometime this year.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. That's sometime in 2019. All right. That's enough information then. You guys, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor.
Yeah.
Yes, Joanna.
Well, thanks so much to Andrew and Hope for that conversation and just the wisdom and the insight that they're bringing to us around creativity, worship, songwriting, and local churches doing that in teams together. I love that conversation. I also want to thank my friends, The Belonging Co., for introducing me to Andrew and Hope just so we could have this conversation. I hope you got something out of it. Maybe you want to share this with someone in your world who's in worship context, or they're a songwriter, aspiring songwriter. I hope that it encourages them too. If you like it, share it, tell your friends. We're still a really new podcast, so we're trying to continue to get the word out about Word Made Digital. All right, next up, next week, Danielle Strickland. If you don't know Danielle, she's an author of about 5 books. She hosts her own podcast. And she also, though, she speaks to huge and small audiences all over the world. And she's also founded things like Infinitum, Amplify Peace, Brave Global, and the Women's Speakers Collective. So I'm going to be diving into how to give a good talk with her next week. It's going to be a great conversation. And thanks again to my sponsor, Wycliffe College. It's just such an affordable way to get a theological education. It's one of the reasons I chose to go there. If you're a Canadian, it's $602 per course. That's an amazing price compared to a lot of other schools. And it's really flexible, whether you want to go in class or you want to go online, full-time, part-time. There's a ton of different options of how you can study at the school, so I encourage you to check it out, wycliffecollege.ca/wordmadedigital. Okay, see you next week with Danielle Strickland.
Thanks for listening to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. If you like this content, hit subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Head over to joannalafleur.com for more free tools, interviews, and media for creatives and communicators. We'd love to help you be the best you can be at communicating the best news in the world.